Well,
Awesome.
welcome everyone to another episode of CS Skills Exchange. We actually have a few guests with us today from Tabnine, and I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then they'll go into, I believe they have a presentation for us as well as a demo. So Brandon, I guess I'll let you kick it off and get us started.
Perfect. Well, I'll do quick intros, and hey, a number of y'all, it's good to see y'all again. Former GitLabber, used to build out a bunch of the alliances and channel, a bunch of fun open source stuff for about three and a half years with 3 years with GitLab. About a year ago, moved over into a little company that is called Tabnine, which we're going to get to chat a bunch today. And the world is small, and so about 6 months ago, the world of AI for development came full circle, and we ended up in the same boat because GitHub launched something called Copilot. So I'm going to go a little bit today. Goals today, as in the doc, are certainly give a little bit of like, what is AI for code? How does it sort of fit in? We've done some great integrations. We have a really fun roadmap of other fun stuff that we're going to keep doing together. So that's really my goal, is to give you guys some context on what it is, a fun demo so you get to see it. We're going to give you all a whole bunch of free access to play with it all you want with you or your customers. And what we expect and why we wanted to get a little bit ahead of this is obviously curious to see if you are hearing anything about Copilot. Clearly we do, but that's because there's a duopoly. It's us and Copilot. So just want to get some good education for you all. Make sure you know that we're here as a resource, and run from there. And as always, any questions, you all been down this more times. I've been down this many times. Add all the questions into the doc, so we'll get to that. And I think that's about it. Marshall, do you want to do a quick intro on your side?
Hi, yes, thank you for having us today. My name is Marshall Young. I worked with Tabnine since January. I do customer success, solutions architect, engineering, all of the things that need to be done in a small startup. So I'm happy to be here. I'll be giving you guys a short demo today of a couple of things. So hopefully you can kind of get an idea of how the tool works if you're not already familiar with how AI tools work in the IDE. So thank you.
Cool. I'm going to do quick screen share and grab there. So uber simple from this standpoint. Real straightforward. These are what's driving why AI for software development matters. These are all things you all know well. Common a lot. Code continues to be common, always has been, but has become more common and more reusable. A lot of it, ton of code online. So machine learning models require a lot of training data to build them. Having that available is really important. So that's been helpful. ML models, particularly, we're going to be talking transformer models. If you really want to geek out on this, like I'd like to geek out, and we'll send you all sorts of fun stuff to read about it. By all means, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time around uniqueness of why these models work or what came through them, but suffice it to say, about 2.5 years ago, transformer models became real and capable of executing and doing what we're starting to see today. And then we've just seen a big explosion from there. And then the last piece, which we all know, is there's never enough developers. So that's kind of the issues. Some fun stuff. Fun fact, we'll get into how we get this data, but last month, Tabnine wrote, based our calculations, about 0.84% of the world's code. So we're in a huge number of developers, and we're writing a whole bunch, helping developers write a whole bunch of fun code. Now, you'll note that that's way below what our real goal is, which is we want to double software productivity. So if we're at 0.84%, we're like 50x too small. So we got plenty of work to do, but pretty excited on where that stands. To get there, we see 3 primary things we got to do. One, you got to have developers love you. And the end of the day that's probably the hardest hurdle to get over. Do developers love the tool? Because they're not going to use something they don't like. They just won't use it. You can't force it down their throats. So the short answer is absolutely. We've got millions of developers. We are rated one of the very top tools in all the marketplaces, ID marketplaces. So this is one that we're never done with. So maybe I shouldn't say done because it's never done, but we are definitely the biggest platform for AI development out there right now. And we've got a lot of happiness. So that's awesome. Second stage we're in is, hey, how do we help get that to teams and organizations, enterprises, not just individual developers, but also teams and enterprises. And that's, we're well down that phase with thousands of paying teams that use Tabnine for their teams and on custom models. And then the last one, which is probably won't spend a lot of time, but is really interesting. There's a big need in software development to help companies, and we'll just be very blunt, easy use case. GitLab has 2,500 to 3,000 external contributors. That's amazing, but contributing into the GitLab codebase is tough. It's got a huge hurdle to get from I want to contribute to I can contribute. And the ability to get up that very quickly is actually something we've already built out and are working with GitLab on. So we'll spend a little time there, probably less than the others. I'm going to do a little context and then throw it to a demo because I think it's helpful to have a demo. Tabnine, the ease of it is it actually feels like autocomplete. Great. Autocomplete means easy adoption. A developer can be up and running with Tabnine in 3 to 5 minutes. Not complex, fits right in the world they're already doing. Difference though is this has been around, autocomplete's been around forever, continues to be around, but autocomplete has always been around syntax, and you'll see that's what you get today versus intent. So what I wanted to do on that is give you a little context of how it fits in, and I'm going to throw it to Marshall on the demo so you get to see intent in action. Little idea of how Tabnine fits GitLab. We fit obviously in an ID, which isn't directly a GitLab product, but we also integrate directly into the source code repositories at GitLab. So that's where we fit. And we're also working on long-term next steps in enabling that into the merge request. So any case, we're not going to spend a bunch of time there. This is sort of how we fit into it. I'm going to throw a demo over to Marshall. So let me stop sharing. Let Marshall pick up the demo. I'll go on mute, and Marshall, it is yours.
All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I've made it a little bigger. Everybody always complains that my screen's too tiny, but I do like the giant 4K screen. So if everybody can see that, I can blow it up a little more, but hopefully that's at least visible. One of the things I would like to start off speaking about is to declare to you guys that I'm not the world's best programmer. I like to mess around. I like to make mistakes. I'm not the world's best programmer. One of the things I always appreciate when somebody gives me some code to review or to use in a project is that things are well commented, right? I think the idea behind having very solid, detailed comments and explanations in the code itself is a way of maintaining both hygiene as well as reducing organization. One of the things we've really pushed with the newer model that we've rolled out for Tabnine is the ability to understand English language in comments, which oftentimes gives the tool something a little bit more specific about what you intend to do in the code and helps guide the algorithm in giving you what you want. So while it does require typing a bit more, I don't think anybody who actually puts hands to keyboard and maintains or builds code is ever going to really complain about too many comments explaining precisely what the code does. So what I'm going to demonstrate for you here is just a really simple, very basic concept of how Tabnine understands context through comments, and then gives you multi-line completions to help you do that a little faster. So as you can see, I'm working in Python today. I'm a Python person, always have been, but we'll start along here and see how it flows through. What I'd like anybody to do at any point in time is just raise your hand or speak up and ask questions about how it works. I'll give you some understanding of how the algorithm functions. If we have enough time, I will swap over to a more specific example, which shows how somebody who might be a bit more, I would say, of a experienced coder might use the tool itself. And after this demo, I'll talk to you a little bit about how I've seen different types of programmers from junior all the way to senior, very experienced programmers use the tool, because everybody uses it a little bit differently. So in this case, I am going to type a simple comment here. So I'm going to say import libraries. And you can see it's actually doing some prediction itself. I don't usually take predictions, sometimes they're correct, but really I'm typing specifically about what I want to do in the next code block here. So to display graph information, I want to just import some libraries in here. I'm going to hit enter. And then it's going to say, all right, based on displaying graph information, it's going to pull these libraries as a set of libraries that would give you what you need in order to display graph information. And so those are pretty easy to access. And it gives you some code block here. And then I would say, all right, what I want to do next is maybe something as simple as create a random, everybody likes doing this, number generator. That seems to be a common thing for code. And between 0 and 1, that's often pretty common too. And so I'll hit enter, and it's going to say, all right, I'm going to use the numpy random state. And it also is contextually aware of the fact that I already asked it that I would want to display that information. So the tool itself says, well, you probably want to plot whatever you generated previously. So it actually generates the comment and brings in the code to do the plotting of that information directly after that. So to show you why that's important, I think we have to understand exactly how machine learning algorithms work. And I'm probably going to explain this a little bit more detailed than most folks on the call necessarily need. But understand that machine learning isn't just return based on what was simply typed before, right? There's definitely there's an art form to the complexity of the returned answers here. And you can get much longer completions or much shorter completions, but oftentimes the way the algorithm is trained really makes a difference. What I'm displaying to you here, guys, is very common open source Python code. So this would be stuff that we could find free licenses out there on any Git repository. And these would be things like examples, right? Not too many folks are probably going to ask for random number generators in their code. It would be more specific than that, especially if you're writing for a customer or for your internal teams. But ultimately, the model itself has to be tweaked and trained on specific areas of code in order to make it better. So think about going to school, right? You'll learn general understandings. So mathematics, algebra help you understand some classes, but in order to understand organic chemistry, algebra isn't really a tool to do that. You need to understand organic chemistry, read the textbooks, go to class and learn that. In some ways, we do the same thing with the algorithms ourselves, right? One of the powers that Tabnine has, and I really enjoy this, is building custom models for particular customers that are looking for specific answers in their coding needs. So we can build models that are Python-based, Ruby, JavaScript, you name it. We have 30 some languages currently, and those can be tweaked even further to combine languages or libraries specifically for a particular task. Along those lines, I'm going to jump really quickly to a different Python code here, and this is taken from AWS. It's their Python CDK for creating a REST API, right? I use this to demonstrate to some folks who oftentimes in the DevOps world, they do things that are very repetitive. And this is a more specific model that is aimed directly towards an experienced DevOps engineer. What I'll do here is I'll start doing some of the code that creates the REST API itself. But what we want to look at is I have a lot of the tools that are sort of natively built into VS Code, as use air quotes there. So what we can see is what's being suggested by Tabnine versus what sort of are the syntax suggestions that would come from the built-in tools in VS Code as you would get if you download it. And so in this case, right, we would say the completion is trying to say, I understand the comments up above. So I'm just going to say I'm creating a REST API. Okay, so it understands that I want to create it first. And this would be something to say, okay, it knows that I want the API name to be in there, right? And in this case, I'll return that. And it also gives the ability to get some like information. And you can notice here, by the way, and I'll just on the screen, right? So if I'm just logging some info here, it understands based on the REST API capitalization, because it's looking through the comments here, that might be something that I'm interested in doing. So it's going to say, all right, I understand that you want capitalized. That's how you wrote it in the comment. And I'm also understanding that I'm creating the API name and I'm returning, even though that really isn't part of the code that I wrote already. So it's both contextually aware of what you wrote, as well as looking in the code and the model for the Amazon CDK in order to create something that's very static and standard with the procedures that Amazon calls out as best practices for working with DevOps in Python for AWS. That's an example of a very specific model. So with that, I just want to stop here and see if there's any questions. And if not, we can hand it back over to Brandon.
Shri, I see you typing a question. I don't know if you want to come off mute and verbalize.
Yeah, okay, I've partially typed it, but I'll just verbalize first. So thank you so far. It looks very exciting. If I was to think about integrations and think about integrating this inside the GitLab web interface, so merge requests or web ID, whatever, are there relevant SDKs or APIs that Tabnine already has today?
So I'm going to add some links here to, and actually, I think I'm going to ask Mike's on. So while I'm presenting, it'll be slightly delayed. We have a shared development and roadmap of areas that we want to integrate. So the initial, Marshall, if you're good, you want to flip over, give me control here for a sec. I'll go back. The short answer is yes. So, well, I should say, we've got a roadmap of where else we would love to be doing that integration. The next one, which will take a fair amount of joint work to do well, but it's very doable. What you saw here is Tabnine as a coach. So if you're all familiar with pair programming, the idea behind pair programming and what Tabnine focuses on in the IDE is about being positive reinforcement. So this is the plus and minuses for a developer. There's both, there's a lot of red X's. You did something wrong that end up in, for example, an MR, right? And you could use, and that's, you're spot on, this technology we could use to create MRs in the pipeline. Not a problem. That's something that's kind of the next step. Most of where Tabnine has mostly focuses, how do we shift those, what would otherwise be an MR, all the way left so that it becomes something that is your a positive reinforcement. So if you think about it, generally speaking, our goal has always been first to be that positive reinforcement to a developer, such that a developer, and you can read bunches of these comments, the developer says, hey, it makes me a better coder. Oh my God, it read my mind. That's a lot of what we want to focus on. So short answer is yes, you've nailed on where we're going. It is something that is very doable. It is something we're going to need, and I've already got a bunch of work already listed in there, and I'll put the links into the issues that we're off and running. We have on. The first step we tackled jointly was, hey, let's first just get the maximum. Let's give AI capabilities to the GitLab repositories, right? And make those powerful and shift those left, right? So what this really, from the simplicity of what we have today, is about getting the insights that are already in your repository into the hands of a new developer, so when they get started. And so that was kind of step one. In terms of where we're headed, you're spot on that there's a lot of other places that we can definitely go. So I'll pause, Sri. I could go deeper, but is that helpful for now?
No, it's really good. I'd love to collaborate and work together on a concept of how this would look. So we don't have to build it right now, but just work on a concept of how a code reviewer can use Tabnine to suggest improvements to somebody else's code. That's one. And maybe a related question would be, I think you already mentioned this, but training a model specifically on self-managed instances, so only looking at repos belonging to a certain organization?
Yep. So the short answer on that one, so let me take this sort of just a little bit in reverse order. So there's already the integration with GitLab.com. We are looking, the next step on that is, hey, for self-managed developers, we have a couple workarounds, so we can make that work. If you have a customer you want to work to do that with, we've actually had some customers approached us that said, hey, we do have a self-managed, we'd like to build a model. That's something we can work with today as is. The full transparency, the biggest challenge is in GitLab.com, there's a process called Workhorse that allows for long-running applications that doesn't exist for a self-managed instance. So you'll see in the notes that we have in here on which we'll put links up to the issues. That's actually one that we're also working on, is what's the right way to integrate that for a self-managed. We can solve that today, though. We have easy workarounds. I'd like to make it like uber simple. So make it just as easy as what we're seeing with the hundreds of users and companies already that have used connected their GitLab.com to Tabnine. So yes, short answer is I think we're in a good step, but we got plenty of more fun stuff to do, and being able to do it with you would be awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is a little bit of sort of how it fits. Context is what you're here. Marshall showed this. This is the notion of where all of that context is being pulled from. This is just an example. So it's just, hey, you're coding through a basic AWS S3 bucket. When we have that model, where is that data coming from? And mostly this is give you a context of just like, this is, you can't solve it any other way in terms of really pulling the best data, the best coding practices out of your code. So I'll go through this kind of quick. This is how we got to that number. You were like, hey, how'd you get 0.84? We are currently we have just under 1 million monthly active users. The large majority of those are daily active users. So very, very, very high engagement level. And they're 70-80% professional developers. So this is sort of that, hey, we got a bunch of happy developers. And on average, it's writing and suggesting about 34% of their code that they're doing. Basic data, you can link on it if you're interested. It's fun. This is developers that are happy. We talked about that, but if you're interested in kind of where they're at, already in a bunch of companies, a lot of them, full transparency, we're in just about every company on the planet as individual developers. We're in thousands of companies with smaller teams. We obviously, our goal, being very transparent, is continue to grow that in where it's a large deployment across a key piece of the entire DevOps platform. So Tabnine, it would love to obviously follow the lead that and support GitLab as you all are on that journey as well. In terms of where we're going, this is obviously sort of the key. If we go back to y'all have been through the fun of all the training and, hey, what are the exact problems you need to solve? This is just sort of a journey they had to go through. I'm going to spend a few minutes here just for solution architects, like what do we have? What are all the components? You saw some of it, you saw the IDE pieces, but on the right-hand side, in the purple box, this is individual. So think this is what Marshall was showing. This is how an individual experiences. Code completions, snippet suggestions. A snippet suggestion, just larger. Code completions are going to be smaller. It's nuanced, but it's fun to do both. And there's a lot of work to make both work. There's live review. In fact, you might have seen a little bit of this. This is where if you open up in your IDE, a set of code, it might put in a little squiggly line with the yellow that says highlight that says, hey, you might want to look at this. The code that you've written could get better, and here might be a suggestion. So that is in there in beta. Part of exactly where Sri was talking, the directions is, it's useful for code search. Now, I want to be sort of really clear because first off, GitLab has great code search. There's code search that's very specific. Like I want this snippet of code. I want to see every place it exists. There's good tools for that. This is code search. Like I solved a problem in this way. How do I do matching to something that isn't the exact code, right? But it does something very similar. This is the soft matching that would say, I'm running a process over here that was built very similar to this process. They may be explicitly different for a very good reason. They may very well not be, in which case standardizing those is, of course, quite valuable. We talked already about this. Sri is already a step ahead. Hey, a PRMR review. Yeah, absolutely. That's a place that is in beta that we've already got out and played with a number of places. We haven't done a bunch of shipping on it for the reasons we'd love to get that locked in with GitLab. But this is something that we even have some good beta work already underway that we can even show if people are really interested. And then the last piece on this, which is really helpful, is just insights analytics. So this gives you Notion as an individual developer. You would get in Tabnine a dashboard that says, hey, here's what my completions look like. Here's how it's made me more productive. And that helps both for an individual and it helps for a team in being, again, significantly more efficient. This certainly is some fantastic when we tie it into the overall development lifecycle that GitLab drives beautifully. Think of this just as additional data on the furthest left part of the development lifecycle, right? So this is just a supercharged tool to help really drive home all the great velocity that someone's already got in running, with GitLab. So that's kind of the right size. That's what an individual developer sort of interfaces with. The left-hand side, let me sort of give you a little bit of, this is the Marshall hit on this, but think of these as more of a layer cake from bottom to top in terms of what models are. So Tabnine lives and breathes on data and models that it builds. That's how you get what you saw. How do we build them and where they come from? It's really about data. And so we start at the base level with a very large universal data set. That data set is a couple things. It's obviously very large, but most importantly, it's from a license standpoint, we only use fully permissive public code to build this. We'll get into why this is really important when we talk competitive, but just keep that in mind. From then on top of it, you can build a model that's even custom to you. You all have the one. We have a GitLab model that we built one with you, then you gave some more data. We built a second one, it got better. We're actually playing on our side now. We just shipped a bunch of new models around Ruby on the back end that we're going to rebuild your model again. So just like GitLab, Tabnine, this is an iterative process where we take a model and we iterate on it, and it continues to get more and more efficient for the users. The other two are other additional data sets above. So ISV stack. So we can bring in, if you're an AWS developer running on GCP, Marshall showed that. We have an AWS DevOps model. Very valuable if that's what you're doing. And that's curated with Amazon. And Amazon said, here's our best code for DevOps engineers. Google said, here's our best code for front engineers. So we have models that help someone based on the platform or the ISVs that they're using, think all their stack, making a really, really good model that helps you adopt the best practices from the stack you've already decided on, right? And stay current to it. Then there's data that comes in from team interactions. So this is the idea of pair programming, taken kind of also the next level. Hey, as your team is working on it, that's data that can help will help that model get better and better, improve over time. It's the notion of a transformer model. So that's kind of the core of what you see when you ask what Tabnine is. It's those pieces, it's the models, then using that model to help bring more value. That's your AI layer to GitLab and the great code and development you all do, and customers already do. We can spend time on model. It's very similar to yours. We got a free version that's focused on developers that anyone can use, just like GitLab. We've got a Teams version, which is just like Premium, which is focused on teams. And we have an enterprise version that is focused on, security and large customers, just like Ultimate. So we can chat about it, but it's pretty much the same idea from a model standpoint as go to market. A lot of good value. This is just a very specific example. You all, when we built models together with you, and we give reports out on these models, so you know if you work with a customer, we not only build a model, but we have very clear reports on what you're getting, and a very programmatic route, then best practices in machine learning to handle, cleanse, and segment the data so that when you get that feedback back, you know you've gotten the best model possible. And we're giving you transparency because machine learning is a little fuzzy, and it's nice for people to have really good visibility of the value of it. Our architecture is also the same. So we have one option that is local that you can run just like GitLab. You could literally run it. Tabnine runs on your actual machine, which is pretty amazing that you're running a transformer model on your machine. We have a self-managed option that customers can put in their data centers, and we have a cloud-hosted version that we run on GCP like you. So not really surprised you're seeing that we play it the same way. And we think of it, I think the only nuance to this is if we want to run in a customer's data center, they're going to have either, we prefer a big VPC on AWS or Google, because at that scale, we're going to want GPUs. Oftentimes customers inside their data centers don't have GPUs sitting around. So just a little note there, but one don't need to. We talked a little bit about this. This is just data is the lifeblood of models, and the lifeblood of that models we build together with partners. So we build that with the Rust Foundation, with CNCF, with AWS, and then we build custom models that help expand the way they reach to their developers. There's nothing at all that GitLab needs to do here. It's just very similar to in line to what and how you all think about the space of supporting. We have very similar core partners, very similar models that in terms of go to market. You already know this, you all front and center from repositories. And then I'm going to spend the last little bit and then quick get to questions on competition. So the short answer is in the space, there's two players. There's us and there's GitHub. In this space, we both look at models. We start with very similar backend models. We both use transformer models. GitHub uses a model that is called either GPT-3, also known as Codex, from a company called OpenAI, which they bought, which we can all now refer to officially as closed AI. They were sort of the initial leaders there. When Microsoft bought them, the rest of the world went elsewhere. And they went to companies like AI21, to Rico, to Hugging Face. We work with all the above. So think of it like, not surprisingly, everything's been consolidated. Microsoft's done the same thing they did with when they bought GitHub. Everything's proprietary in GitHub. They've done the same thing they did with the models on the back end with OpenAI. That's fine. They can have fun. They're going to build it. That's to Microsoft. The rest of the world wants this to continue to be open, and that's where we work. So GitLab is all about open source, open collaboration. We view the world in the exact same way. Difference is Copilot is one model to rule them all. It does some very important things. One, it trains on you as a user. So just everyone be conscious, if you use Copilot, every piece of data, every code you write is sent to Microsoft. That they're transparent about that. That is how they run the model. There's security issues out the yin yang on this. The other thing is, again, back to the model, they use all code inside of GitHub. What does that mean? It means if you're writing a completion like Marshall was showing, that happens to look somewhat similar to some private code that they've already trained, they may throw you back private code, and they may throw you APIs from the customer that they trained on. I don't really have to go down the path, like not tenable for any customer. That's, I don't know why they chose that, but we're entirely fine with they chose that because it's not tenable for any customer that's looked at it seriously. And then the most important piece that we're really different is like we build these models, and a large model will never be as good as a custom model. The trade-off of a custom model is you need to know what you're using it for, but that works very well inside of a company and with a team. So when you get to a company and a team, they know we are doing, let's just say GitLab. Hey, we know it's going to be Ruby with some JavaScript and maybe a little Go. We know exactly what you're building, and that pattern is going to be very similar. So we don't need to look at the world's universal open source code that's this big. We can be very specific, and that means we can bring a lot more context and completions into the space. So we also support more IDs. Not surprisingly, currently they focus on Microsoft products like VS Code only, and primarily big Microsoft languages like proprietary TypeScript. They will expand those. We know they will. You know they will. We've seen this jointly together. So I've got other details in here. You're welcome to go through. I'm going to leave it simple. This is the simple slide, and then I'd love to go to questions that anyone has. We have a joint. So a couple things. Joint Slack channel. Please join it. You can to see all the fun work we're doing with your engineers real time. Again, absolute brutal transparency on what's going on, so you know what works, what doesn't. You can go actually back through history. We're making some fun progress. Shout out to Chad Woolley, who's just rolled up his sleeves and done some lot of cool stuff. Then you could create your own model. So I've given you guys free codes here to use with your customers. You can connect any GitLab repository you want, have your own built models. It takes us about 24-ish hours when you've connected for us to go build that model, test it, make sure that it's quality. It may, if you connect it, it's a small repository, we will probably give you back like, hey, too small a repository to build, a great model. And in which case you can let us know, and we can, obviously we would help enrich it. And there's other ways we can make that stronger. There is an internal model that is already built for us. So if you're doing contributions to the GitLab code base, Kyle Weavers has that team. You can ask him. Happy to add more people to that team over time. We're going to probably continue to add more and more engineers so that you guys can be really productive to it. And then lastly, if you anything on AI for code, you hear anything with Copilot, you hear any of that, hey, ping myself or Hezi, who are in that Slack channel, and say, hey, we got a competitive spot. Hey, can you jump on? Can you be our subject matter expert? We are here to support you in what y'all are up to. So I'm going to stop sharing because y'all have it and go to questions.
Alejandro, looked like you have the next one.
Oh, and I'll jump into the, hey, sweet. Okay, now I'm in the questions. Yes, there's so many fun ones. Alejandro, would you like to verbalize?
Yeah, sure. So I work with teams in companies that have teams in LATAM, and a lot of those will do commenting and code documentation in English, but some of them are beginning to use Spanish. And I like the feature that you have where it identifies a comment and starts producing code. I was wondering if you're going to use other languages beyond English, or if the model can identify other languages beyond just English.
Marshall can jump in. I think it is just English today, but
That's correct. As right now, we built the this latest iteration is trained on English only. There isn't a reason we couldn't do it on different languages. Keep in mind, though, that all algorithms need some sort of training data in order to do that. And so you'd have to have a sufficiently large set of open source code base in a different language. Although I guess there's some auto translation opportunities that we could try, right? Like let's use a translation API to put all of the English into Spanish and then train that so that in real time, it's an opportunity. We're not there yet, but I think it's possible.
Thank you.
awesome. Hugo.
Yeah, I have the next question, but I asked it and answered myself. So, this is to verbalize it, right? The integration with Gitpod, because Gitpod integration with GitLab has been there already. And I'm happy to report that all we got to do is use Gitpod's extension for VS Code to install it.
That is it. Yeah, actually, that is a phenomenal use case. And it's actually the GitLab team is looking this for contributors, right? Because if you think about it, it's a really good combination. And also, this is a really important piece you all will run into if y'all aren't. Hugo is sort of hitting on this, but I'll be explicit. Microsoft GitHub has code spaces and Copilot, which are two areas that are currently they're very IDE centric, so they're just not an area that GitLab's really focused on for reasons that are very obvious and totally understand. But yeah, that integration already exists and it works really, really well. So if your customer needs that, it works great because you functionally have Gitpod with its dependencies and everything else needs. You build a custom model and the custom model surface directly through Gitpod. It's a very good 1-2 value if you hear that in the with your customers. So yep, that's built and good. We also work with Coder, and there's a number of others in this space, but I would say our experience has been Gitpod's the market leader in cloud-based or browser-based IDEs today.
Thank you.
Samir, I think you're up.
Yeah, I had a couple questions that are already answered, but instead of the question, I do want to start with appreciation. Thank you, Brandon and Marshall, for coming on here and showing this. This is excellent stuff. Thank you for that. I did have a couple questions, although one of them is a comment. I do want to geek out. So Brandon, you had put a call out early on the call, and I'm answering to that call.
Awesome. Well, Samir, you're the only one with questions. So as far as I'm concerned, we can geek out and everyone else can join us until someone else puts another question in. So go for it. It's all yours.
Great. So the last question that I had was, security is a problem, as we all know. A lot of it is code patterns that can be identified using static analysis, as we all know. Well, if there's AI that will help me write better code, can it also help me write more secure code? That's sort of the context of this question. And really the example is just, if I'm writing some code and maybe I'm going to leave something weak in the code in terms of being able to exploit, could Tabnine offer me some suggestions and say, hey, wait, you're about to make a blunder here. Can you not do that, or something like that? Just putting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we want to approach this, and it's part of like, how do we make code consistent, follow best practices, maintainable, lower tech debt, reduce security issues based on basically human error, let's be honest, right? Most of it comes from, I didn't quite understand how to properly implement the code for our team or our company. The best part about using a custom model that is specifically curated on the front end towards code that is both secure and repeatable and maintainable, if that's the code base that you use to train the algorithm, then the suggestions that the programmers will get while they're working will follow those best security practices. And also, as Brandon said, on the MR portion of submitting code too, the opportunity comes for review of code and say, this does not fit with what the algorithm was trained on best practices. So it can flag that saying, hey, this doesn't look like what my algorithm was trained on. It will flag it and say, you should review this portion and make sure that this meets best practices for security. So in terms of like a tiny voice popping on the computer and yelling at you, hey, don't do that. The way it would come through is, hey, as I'm typing something to do with security, it would give me those suggestions saying, this is the best practice of security. And the more consistent you train that algorithm to be, the more consistent those suggestions will be, right, for the coders that are using them. And that's kind of the pair programming idea. Think of it as somebody who is a senior engineer at a company whose concern is only security. Have them sitting beside a junior programmer coming into the team for the first time and saying, hey, nope, that's not the method we're using. That's not the structure we're using. This is how you do it instead, and show them that. So that's how we would try to inject best practices for security. And obviously, like any machine learning algorithm, right? Garbage in, garbage out, or gold in, gold out. Again, curating the custom model on the front end really makes all the difference in how well this performs.
And if we're thinking, just sort of building on this, this is also another clear reason we love working with GitLab, because of all the security features you all offer. Now you've created that, that great feedback cycle, right? So when you write good code, or you have a mistake, or you've got a linter, like all the great security stuff that ends up in the pipeline, then applies to the code, which then gets better, which comes back through to suggest. And all we're doing is taking those best practices that are already being surfaced and corrected in the pipeline in GitLab. We're just then shifting to the next developer down the line, gets those earlier, right? So you have fewer red X's, but you need both, right? So when we look at this, this is also like they're self-reinforcing mechanisms on both sides.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So this is really interesting because it doesn't seem like there's any proactive implementation at this point, but with the solution you have and the way Marshall explained it, it seems like if a security individual decided that, hey, here's a better way of writing this code so it's secure and train the model, then that can become sort of the template for them to use. But I'm wondering if there's any better approach, because remember, security happens when something is found in code in real life situations. So for example, if you look at what happened with Log4j, okay, that code existed for a long time until it was actually hacked, and then a CVE came out, and now we have a better way of writing that code, or actually using a better package for doing that. So that's a simpler situation where a package, you're putting a wrong version, you can suggest a new package and everything will be good. But then there are other situations where there may not be a CVE, there may be a common weakness because of the way you write the code. Maybe you're pushing the bits and bytes in a way that's going to make your system very unstable. So those patterns are widely known and shouldn't be a security person's job to train your model. Are you training those models? That's my question.
Yes. So some of the ways that we're going about this are two. One, again, our explicit way that we start about curating code is we've made a different choice. Instead of taking all the code and say GitHub, which is what Copilot does, that's a lot of crappy code and a lot of old code. And what's useful or not useful, not there. So we go, first off, we use a lot of code, but we use, things like the pile, some very curated, understood code. The second piece that we add to that, this is really, really valuable, is this work where we're adding additional code, say, for example, around Amazon from Amazon. So what you're going to start seeing, and it's already been baked in there, is well, now we're taking the best curated code from Amazon for writing on Amazon. And as a security engineer who's not, say, you're at GitLab, you can't explicitly have any idea what the best practices on Amazon necessarily are. I mean, you might if you're only doing AWS, but you get the gist. Amazon knows what's best and most secure in Amazon. So their model, they're giving us the data that says, here's our model, here's what we wanted it, here's the most current, most secure code. That then just becomes what you get as part of your model. So what we're doing here in by aligning interest is Amazon wants to get the best practices out to their code base, to their customers. They don't know how to do it today. Like if anyone's played with Amazon, raise your hand and be like, oh my gosh, it's the 283rd product. Good luck figuring out where that is. And it's the API version number 16. Boom, no idea how to follow that. Amazon does though, and they're very interested in making sure that you adopt the 263rd, 68th, whatever product is, and that you're using the most current API, right? So it's in their interest to build, so it's their model. They give us the best data for their model, most current, that then gets incorporated in, say, you have DevOps engineers that do deploy stuff on Amazon. You don't need to then go, hey, what are the best practices? That's been incorporated into because Amazon wants to get that to its developers. So this is the process. That's where that ecosystem, it didn't spend a lot of time on it, but this is where that self-reinforcing mechanism works really well. Amazon, we can say, hey, yeah, we're going to make that better for everyone across the board because we're going to make it right. We're going to be able to make those recommendations right in the IDE, and they're going to be taking your most current code, best practices. So that's when we look at this, that's where we've started the first steps on that with some of the big platforms. We're going to keep working on that across the board, across all the big key ISVs. And jointly then what we're all doing is taking gold in, gold out and we're taking the interest of Amazon, they want to get gold. They care about gold about Amazon. They're willing to spend a little bit of time and tell us the best code. That's all they need to do. It's very easy. This is our best code. We build the model and then we federate it out to users. So I hope that helps. That's sort of where I think we're step, 4 or 5 down a long journey that will be making that work. But we found very good alignment for everyone in helping move security forward through those processes.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you, Brandon, for explaining that, because I kind of missed some of that nuance when you were describing the slide. And you putting focus on that really helps me differentiate between what GitHub solution is and what your solution is in a much, much more applicable way, right?
Yeah.
It's not, we're just going to take any old code that's out there.
No.
You're actually very focused in curating the right kind of code, which usually means also secure kind of code, and that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and you see that this is the loop going on that slide. You'll see those companies are giving the expert guidance, then we help them reach their developers, and then we give them back analytics. Okay, that's good. So this is generalized analytics, not individual on a developer. But so now we're connecting this gap that's existed between ISVs that have huge DevRel teams that can't reach and no idea of what their devs are doing. They want to really help those devs, and those devs want to help them, but the connecting of this there's no one's ever connected those dots for them. So by connecting those dots, we bring value, and then we get great code gets better, and that flywheel is off and running.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, of course. Good question. I know we have just the last couple minutes, and let me see if there's anything else in. Good. Let's see. I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see anything else in the doc. Thank you, Brandon and Marshall. Looks like we have a few folks that need to run, but
Of course.
thank you so much for your time. I think this was very informative, and
Thank you all. And we'll do the same. By the way, when we find we've already reached out, but when we have customers inbound that say, hey, would like to use it, we will make sure we also reach out to the sellers and everything. And we've done that a few times. We'll keep doing it with Mike LeBeau. Thank you in making sure we keep these connections up and running. So we look forward to it. And you all, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Brandon and Marshall.
Thanks, team.
Of course. Cheers.